Perfect.
Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Welcome,
guys.
everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Good
We're
evening.
gonna take some time to let everybody join for the latecomers and for the people to connect, because I see some still connecting with their audio. Please, everyone, mute yourselves when you're not speaking. When with such a big group, that's really important. Just to not have any feedback in this stuff. Very cool that everyone is joining. Welcome. So we're going to take a few more minutes to let some more people join. And then we'll start with the introductions of ourselves and the topic. Feel free to, as a note, you don't have to have yourself on video. We are streaming live. So I just want to mention that if you're not comfortable with that, it's also, of course, completely fine to just have your voice and to be anonymous. Welcome, everyone, for those that are just connecting. Nice. I see some people that I know, but also a lot of people that I don't know. That's very good. Creates for the best type of discussion.
Ja, hello, Kami. Okay.
Welcome, everyone. I'm curious, do people here know what the Mind Foundation is, or is this something you're checking out for the first time?
First time for me.
I've heard of it, yes.
Cool. Welcome.
Thank you.
Also, I just stumbled on it. I'm doing some research for a PhD. So.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. So then we need to make a good first impression. Cool. So let's give it 1 more minute, maybe, until so we're sure that everybody who wants to join has the opportunity to see it from the start, and then we'll get into it. So again, maybe people that didn't hear it yet, this is being live streamed over Facebook and YouTube. If you're not comfortable with it, please don't feel forced to put on your video, though you're of course very welcome to. And please, if you're not speaking, keep yourself muted, and we will ask people to step forward when it is appropriate to do so. You can always, of course, feel free to use the chat if you have a remark in the meantime, or use the Q&A to ask questions. Oh, actually, there's no Q&A. You can just use the chat. Yeah. Cool. Should we get started? What do you think?
Yes.
Perfect.
Let's go.
Yeah, awesome. So very heartfelt welcome to everyone. My name is Andy Meyer. I'm a scientific employee at the Mind Foundation, working there after my internship. My personal background is in clinical neuropsychology, in which I have a master's. And my co-hosts for today are Patrick Wentorp and Lucas Beestouw. Patrick is a philosopher by heart and soul, as I know him. And Lucas Beestouw is a neuropsychologist currently doing his PhD on addictive behaviors in adolescents. And this is the second episode in the series of the online discussion. And it's basically a format where we want to engage with people from around the world and talk about topics that are maybe go slightly beyond the purely scientific, so that we can see people's opinions and see what would fit in society for most people, and what are the opinions, what do people know. And how we usually do this is that we come across an article or a topic that we find interesting, and we want to base our discussion upon this. So our topic that we came across this time was by Dr. Carl Hart. Some of you might be familiar with him. It's the dude with the dreadlocks, a very experiential oriented neuroscientist and neuropharmacologist. and a very renowned person. And he advocated, I personally never heard about it, but he stated that there was such a thing as psychedelic exceptionalism. So psychedelic exceptionalism is where I think an opinion that many people hold is that psychedelics among the different classes of substances, they are given a special status. For instance, cocaine or MDMA, that's recreational, but psychedelics, this leads to spiritual development. These substances have intrinsic worth above and over what all the other substances have to offer. And like intuitively, there is something to be said for it, perhaps, but also what this creates in the society is a sort of narrative which can marginalize people if people who I don't choose to experiment with crack cocaine or methamphetamines, and they're struggling with this. And by having this narrative of, oh, that's just bad, it has no merit, you also make it harder for them to get out of this role, because society enforces it. We're all familiar with these kinds of processes, and that can, of course, have some ethical problems from a humanitarian point of view. So what we'll be doing today is Lucas and Patrick will be presenting the two sides of this coin and vouching for either psychedelic exceptionalism or a complete egalitarian approach to psychoactive substances. After they have presented their views, we'll give you some time for questions if you don't really grasp or anything is unclear. And then we'd like to ask you to go into breakout rooms. We'll see later how many exactly we'll do. And then we'll give you about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to discuss amongst yourselves and to try and crystallize where you guys are on the spectrum. And we'll ask you to appoint one person as sort of the speaker for the group to afterwards present the consensus of your group. And after which we will see, maybe there are some people that want to have a discussion. If some groups came to different conclusions, it's interesting to see how and why, and if people maybe want to add something to that conversation, at which point we'll kind of have an open discussion. And maybe we also have some other questions that we can explore if we so want. Yeah, we also prepared a poll which might be interesting at this point before the opinions get presented, to see what kind of the stances are right now. So I believe now you should see a poll come up, and please, you can choose to agree or disagree with the statement. I believe, okay.
Mm-hmm.
There is a majority, but it's not unanimous. Okay. It's, I won't say anything for your judgments. You guys can see it yet, right? So I need to wait until 3 more people need to vote. So I think at the bottom of your screen, you see the poll option. If you click on it, you can vote. Of course,
it should also be displayed.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't really know yet.
Yeah, of course you made it.
Sorry.
Of course, we made it on purpose that we have only these 2 options, right? Okay.
Did you cast the vote or are you abstaining? Cool. Let's move on. So we have. If I end polling, they get the results, right?
Yeah. And then you click on. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. So okay, 74% and 20 versus 26%. I hope we'll get a bit of a good random sample in the breakout rooms. Cool. So without further ado, I'll reiterate at some points what exactly is the purpose. But I'd like to give the floor to Patrick or Lucas. I actually don't know which of you would like to start.
Of that.
Perfect.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Andy, for this cool introduction. As he mentioned, basically, Patrick and I are gonna each present one side of the argument, and I'll basically argue that psychedelic exceptionalism is a bad view to hold, or a harmful view to hold. As Andy already mentioned at the beginning, psychedelic exceptionalism is the idea that psychedelics are inherently better than other psychoactive substances. I'll probably be saying drugs from now on. I mean psychoactive substances, but drugs is way more easy to, way more fast. So the first assumption we have to make is that actually a lot of people believe that. So I'm really glad about the results from the poll that the majority of you think that's true. Because I was kind of worried everybody would already have my opinion. So this is actually quite nice. So this assumption is basically a fact, at least for our little group. So in the next part, what I'm trying to do is argue that holding this view can be harmful and can have negative consequences. And we therefore, as a community, shouldn't endorse this specific view. To make this argument, I'll need to make one other assumption, which is basically that I believe that all drugs, all psychoactive substances can be used responsibly, and you can make an informed decision about every drug if you are well informed and know all the facts, basically. So obviously, if you disagree with that fact, you won't probably agree with my whole point, but I think that's at least that first assumption is where I'm starting from. So what is the harmful thing about psychedelic exceptionalism? Andy already mentioned one point kind of at the beginning, which is the language of saying that psychedelics are better than other drugs, right? For example, the most common examples are heroin, crack cocaine, and methamphetamine. If you say that psychedelics are better, well, you obviously also imply that these drugs are worse, which often casts a judgment on the users of these drugs. So it might lead to stigma for the people who choose to use other substances than psychedelics, right? And this stigma is not just a theoretical thing that happens and it might make people feel bad. It can actually have very real and very dangerous consequences. So for example, users of stigmatized drugs often face harsher penalties. So an example of this would be the difference between cocaine and crack cocaine in the USA. There are way harsher penalties for possession of crack cocaine, even though it's basically the same as cocaine. It just has more stigma attached to it. So the stigma of crack leads to a very real and dangerous consequence of harsher penalties. And an additional problem with the stigmatization might actually be less access to healthcare. So if someone believes that the drug you choose to use is a bad drug to use, and you're a bad person for choosing to use this drug, they might be less motivated to care for you, to give you the care you need, right? If a person comes to the emergency room with an overdose of a drug you think is bad, you might not support them in their healthcare as best as you can. That's the first point. And the second point is by talking about psychedelics as being good or even as being bad, you support, or we are supporting, a distinction. If we say, well, psychedelics should be in the good category of drugs, then we assume that the separation into good and bad kind of drugs is appropriate. And I would argue that this distinction is actually just unnecessary and inappropriate. So by saying, well, this drug is one of the good drugs, we're kind of validating this system of distinction. And I think this system of talking about good and bad drugs is inappropriate, really, because it's not an evidence-based system. It's not a system based on actual facts about these substances. This has, again, to do with the already existing stigma. So often the drugs that are considered bad, heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, bar salts, so synthetic casinones, they all have very specific stigmas attached to it, and so they are not an accurate perception of these substances. And as I said, it obviously has an influence on healthcare and laws. But another problem that exists because of that is, if you want an evidence-based system, you would need to do proper research on all of these substances, on all the drugs. But as research is being done by human scientists with human biases, who already might have internalized stigma about these substances, the research we're actually doing might be stigmatized research, right? For example, there's some recent, very cool, very interesting research about the connection between psychedelic use and the connection to nature. And I mean, it's great research. It increases the connection to nature. A lot of psychedelic users might say, well, it's obvious. But we do this research because we think that we're going to see something there. But because of the stigma we have for other drugs, I doubt anyone will do research about the connection between heroin and the connection to nature. And so we can't have an evidence-based assessment of all these substances if we decide to only research the things we think might be true. Right, so this can influence actually the proper science we get, and therefore the evidence-based decision we want to make. Yeah, so those are basically the main points. As I said, I think the language we use is important because it can stigmatize the users of other substances of choice, and the stigma can have very real and very harmful consequences for people. And I mean, there's an argument obviously to be made that different substances have different effects, right? It's very clear. Very different drugs do different things. And I'm not arguing that all drugs have equal effects, right? Obviously, caffeine is better for waking you up than alcohol. But I'm saying that no one should be stigmatized or vilified for the drugs they choose to use, even if it's a super harmful drug. Even if we knew this substance is just the worst, if somebody chooses to do this super harmful substance, whatever it is, it shouldn't have any consequence for them on the way the law looks at them, or healthcare looks at them, or other people value them. Yeah, so basically the last point is that we often think we make this distinction of good and bad drugs because we think it's the drugs that have specific good or bad effects. But it's most of the time, it's the context in which we use drugs, right? So it's not an inherent quality of a drug to have a good or bad effect. It's the good or bad quality comes from the way we use a substance. So if we take responsible and informed decisions about our substance use, I think all substances can be considered equal. Thank you, guys. Looking forward to hear your points, Patrick.
Thank you, Lucas. That was a very, very nice introduction. I'm also curious about Patrick's side of the story.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas, for this indeed very well-founded line of argumentation. So what I will do right now is not opposing 100% your point of view. So of course there is differences in the different psychoactive substances in the effect, as you have said. But I think that you have made a quite bold claim in saying that, as you put it, every drug can be used responsibly. So I will basically say that still there are harmful drugs, or drugs that are more harmful than other drugs. And I want to start out with, it's not really a study, yeah? Coming back to the scientists who do biased research, I will share my screen quite briefly and show you this slide. One of you or some of you probably know it. So it's in German, but it says that 40 different international experts, addiction and drug experts, have estimated the risk and danger of the various psychoactive substances. Yeah? So it's not a evidence-based study, but it is an estimation of the international drug experts on the subject. And what they have come up with is this estimation. So they had a scale, 0 to 100, and estimated the risks of the psychoactive substances on the body on the psyche and on other people. So on the left side, you see the harm that is done to the people who consume the substances. And on the right side, you see the harm that is done to other people, the environment, and so on. And what you see right here is that some of the psychedelic substances, so-called psychedelic substances, are one of the least harmful psychoactive substances. So it's psilocybin, LSD, where I think you can argue about whether ecstasy is really a psychedelic drug. But yeah, you see that, for example, heroin or crack and even alcohol and tobacco are estimated as being very dangerous and harmful from these international experts. And I will come back to this in a second. So, Lucas, your line of argumentation was, of course, that this is a bias, or at least partially this is a bias by these experts. And this could be, yeah, but I think it's not 100% a bias, and there is some truth to it. So, as we know from psychedelic science, we have this findings about psychedelic substances and their effect on well-being, pro-social behavior, openness. Yeah, we had this in our first online discussion, and also the effect they have on various mental disorders. And of course, you can argue that maybe alcohol and tobacco have similar effects, yeah, similar good effects. But as of now, this is only a bold claim to be made. And I think it's very difficult to see these differences the drugs have, also the differences in harm, and then at the same time have this kind of lean back approach towards psychoactive substances in general, just saying it's all just psychoactive substances. You either want to use heroin, or you want to smoke, or you want to take LSD. So I think that the contrary, like the 100% opposite of psychedelic exceptionalism, this very egalitarian lean back approach would also lead to very profound problems, because then you would kind of propose drug relativism, so to speak. Yeah, and this is maybe not so good for our society as well. So let me explain this. First of all, I'm of course with Lucas saying that you cannot enforce certain psychoactive substances on certain people. So you cannot say, no, you're not allowed to use alcohol. You have to use LSD or something like this. So it's morally wrong to do this. But at the same time, I think that seeing the differences in the substances, and for example, seeing that smoking does not have that many positive effects except for bodily harm, does not necessarily lead to an exceptionalism for psychedelic substances, right? So, in fact, I think we have a very profound exceptionalism right now, which is the so-called, only my term, but it's the so-called legal drug exceptionalism. So many people say, yeah, the drugs that are legal, for example, alcohol and tobacco, they are good, but all the illegal drugs, they are bad. Yeah, and this is an example for exceptionalism that is also causing a lot of harm, in my opinion. And so the fact is that there can be stigmatization without or with seeing these differences in the psychoactive substances. Yeah, and Lucas, you have made the point that it is unfair for this to be made, to say that, you know, there are differences in the psychoactive substances, and then of course you also have different legal penalties. So this would be unfair. I think, yes, it is unfair, and we have this right now, right? So we say alcohol is a legal drug and psychedelics are illegal drugs. So therefore you have way higher penalties for psychedelics. And of course, this is wrong in any case, but I don't think that psychedelic exceptionalism is our biggest problem here that can be made. So coming back to this argument that drug relativism is not so good for our society, I think that this approach of saying all drugs are equal hinders people to educate themselves on the differences there are between the substances, because they will mainly get the message, you know, it doesn't matter which drug I take, then I simply try out heroin or start smoking, you know, whatever. And this is also something that is not very, but maybe is a little bit harmful for our society. So my approach is rather that psychedelic exceptionalism is an expression of people following these latest scientific findings, which clearly show that psychedelics have, at least this is what we know right now, that they have more positive effects than other drugs, while at the same time it is of course wrong to say, yeah, we have to impose these psychedelic effects on other people, right? So we cannot do this. So in general, my bottom line would be that psychedelic exceptionalism is wrong when it said like different drug users are not equal human beings, which is of course, yeah, wrong and a very harsh and not very humanitarian claim. But when it's psychedelic exceptionalism is right when it said that different drugs should be treated in a different way, and also it should be made transparent that they have different harm and harmful effects. And yeah, that's my point.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Interesting. I believe I've seen many people nod their heads during both presentations of the arguments. So I'm very curious what will happen in the breakout rooms. Before we go into that, is there any questions that people right now have about something, any line of argumentation that was just presented that is not yet clear, or somebody would like to see expanded upon a bit? Perfect.
Hi. Just can I ask a question just from the clarity? So the psychedelic exceptionalism, if it's right, then different drugs should be treated different ways, if I heard that correctly. And if it was wrong, what was the argument on the side of it being wrong?
I think I can answer that.
Thank you.
So if we assume that psychedelic exceptionalism is a correct view to hold, it would mean we would treat basically psychedelics better than other substances, right? Because they are inherently better than other substances, and we might treat them better or in a different way. And if we think, well, psychedelic exceptionalism is not an accurate view to hold, we should view the use of all substances equally, or in some way equal. Yeah, well, you can discuss that. I think it's a complicated issue.
Jelena?
Thank you. May I also just ask a question? Which of these substances are actually causing addiction and which not? So psychedelic exceptionalism, when I first heard, it just reminded me of, some things that are, biologically exceptional for psychedelics is that, for example, they will not cause addiction in comparison to, alcohol or heroin or these kind of things. And yeah, when you say psychedelic exceptionalism, you think of a drug, or at least that's my first association, and not of a person choosing something. So I would not have any problem with, that term just from like basic biology, but maybe you can elaborate if there is something that I do not understand.
I definitely see your question. I think it's a good point to take into the breakout room, because this is the very line of reasoning that psychedelic exceptionalism is. This is the one of the founding arguments for it, which is of course used to justify the thinking, and at the same time, as Lucas pointed out, maybe marginalizes people who use other substances. So I'm not fully answering it. I think the arguments that were presented were clear. So I'd like to invite you all into the breakout rooms. And please, when you go there, if you could take the last 5 minutes to maybe have a quick conversation about who you'd like to perhaps afterwards present the views and the process also of the argumentation that you experience with your group. Because that's something I think that will be interesting for everyone to see how each separate group have their process. Perfect. Thank you and have fun.
All right, see you then back in 20 minutes. Yeah, and there will be a warning 5 minutes before and 1 minute before.
Yeah. Cool. Did 2 people not make it to the breakout rooms, or they just joined?
Yeah, Diego and Daniel, I will. Yeah, 1 second. We'll be in the breakout room very soon. Actually, they have to accept. Yeah, they are already assigned to a certain room. So please accept. I can also assign you again to another one. We'll try this. Yeah, so for all the people who are watching online at the moment, we of course can now elaborate a little bit more on the concept, right? So, Lucas, maybe as I was the latter one speaking, maybe you can give me a little reply on, yeah, maybe my misconception or my arguments that you didn't like. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I actually think we have pretty much the same opinion. I think we're actually not that different in our views. I think we both agree that stigmatization of the users is wrong. We shouldn't be like, people should receive equal health care and appropriate penalties and not based in stigma. We can actually talk about if they should receive annual penalties for drug use, but I think it's a bigger topic.
Yeah.
I actually took some notes while we were talking. I mean, obviously, actually, I absolutely agree that the harms are different. So this sign, when you shared your screen at the beginning, I mean, was a groundbreaking paper, kind of. You said it's not a perfect study, but it basically shows what we should know, that there are different harms. Should we see what Nicola's up to, or should we just keep talking?
I think we could also introduce her to us, yeah?
Yeah.
Because if I just assign her to the
I'll
breakout room.
just keep talking until she's here.
Cool, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously I agree there are different harms. And so you said...
so sorry, Lucas, just quickly. Nicola, if you can hear us, we just did some breakout rooms, meaning we split up the whole group. But as you come in now, you are welcome to be with us and discuss with us until the people from the breakout room are coming back in about 15 minutes. Yeah, but you don't have to. You can also just listen.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, so basically, but the problem with this different harm levels is, on one hand, it's based on the current system. So it's not based on an informed decision people made, because it's, as you mentioned as well, we have the legal and illegal distinction, which very much stigmatizes people and very much is an exceptionalism. Absolutely agree. Alcohol and tobacco exceptionalism is definitely a thing. Mm-hmm. So by rating these harms, I think it's an accurate representation of the harms, because people don't take informed decisions, unfortunately, because they can't. But even then, I definitely agree there are different harms, right? As I forgot her name, but she mentioned in the question she asked about the addictive potential. There are different addictive potentials to different substances. Some substances can kill you in overdose, some can't, right? It seems very clear that LSD doesn't kill you, even if you take a lot. Or maybe like you have to take a lot. I don't think anyone has that much. But it's way easier to overdose with alcohol, heroin, or whatever. But I still think that this distinction, this different levels of harm, shouldn't lead to a value judgment, right? It doesn't mean one drug is better. It just means this drug is more harmful, right? So there's one specific difference they have, but they might have other differences, right? So opioids are way better painkillers than mushrooms, for example. Yeah. Right? I'm actually not so sure. There's actually some other research as well, but I mean, but you get the point, right? They also have different benefits. And so I think it doesn't lead to a value judgment. And I think we might agree on that. That it's, I mean, arms definitely need different
I
ways.
see your point. I see your point. Maybe there is a difference, though, in saying on the one hand side that we have to really withdraw from making any value judgment and being really like, you know, every human being can take the drugs that he or she wants, and have this more lean back approach. That was maybe my main argument, even, that this would lead to like a relativism and people not seeing the risk as they should be, as they should. And I think one thing that was a little bit just tacitly assumed by Dr. Karl Hart, or maybe he didn't mention it on purpose. He brought this Switzerland example with the hospitals who give heroin to people, and I think the general figure of addiction in opioids was 25%, which is quite huge. But then he didn't say what the figure in Switzerland was. So maybe they're still 25%, right? I should have looked it up, but I didn't. So, but yeah, this is of course something that would a little bit, tackle his argument of saying all people can take drugs responsibly if there's still like addiction, which of course I think agree on that addiction is not a good thing for people. Maybe this is the background assumption, but I think that's not a very bold claim to make. Then you see my point.
No, yeah, I definitely see your point. I actually really like your point about this leaned back approach, that it's not accurate or helpful. I never thought it would come across as something like this, but you're absolutely right. I would agree that you shouldn't think, oh, well, I can take just whatever drug, because apparently they are all good drugs, right? They're all the same. Because that is not an informed decision, right? That's what I think it's actually really hard to make an informed and responsible decision, right? I don't know if we ever will have a society where that's possible, right? You need to have very accurate and very good information about the substances you want to take. And that's what I also mentioned about the research, right? If nobody really checks all the risks or whatever, then you might just be better off not taking substances. Right? It's also a very informed decision to say, well, I don't know enough. I'm not good, right? So I think it's kind of difficult. What are your thoughts, actually, Andy? You have some time to talk. Give your opinion.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I was thinking about how the topic you were just discussing, how the egalitarian view about psychoactive substances really places a lot of responsibility information-wise on the individual, and it kind of, to be able to hold this view, you have to assume that people can operate from a knowledgeable, evidence-based manner, that they are aware of the risks, of the harm reduction practices, of the possible outcomes, and that made me realize, especially when you were speaking about the alcohol exceptionalism and nicotine exceptionalism, what we've been seeing in society, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, is a trend where we first had alcohol exceptionalism, that was the only one, and we discovered nicotine. Okay, that was by its nature easily integrated into everyday life because it's not so debilitating. And then, of course, came the green movement with weed, with cannabis, and by giving this an exceptionalism status, there started to be research, there started to be more knowledge, so knowledge was generated, right? And this is exactly now what we're seeing with psychedelics. We are more commonly accepting this exceptionalistic view, thereby generating research, thereby generating knowledge. So maybe to have a societal movement towards this egalitarian view of psychoactive substances, we need to go through these phases of where we hate, oh wait, actually this is special. Maybe, who knows, we're going to have the same with crack cocaine. At some point we'll say, oh wait, actually in this very specific scenario, it actually can have a constructive effect for people suffering from XYZ. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. You have to basically go through the same hoops and slowly legalize one after the other substance, right? I have to say I'm very pessimistic about that. I'm getting a very optimistic view of most countries' drug policy. So, but I mean, it could be, right. It actually sort of never occurred to me. So I think that's a very interesting idea. What are your thoughts, Patrick?
Well, I like the idea of having these kind of overbalance, right? So you had the stigma of, psychedelics are bad, in fact, all illegal drugs are bad. That's why they have been banned, And now you have another extreme. Well, I don't think it's that much of an extreme, but maybe in some circles it is, saying that no, actually psychedelics are medicine, purely medicine, and we need to do research with them in order to really use their potential. And then I think also what Henrik and also other leading researchers already are proposing is that after this phase of fascination and curiosity and maybe even exceptionalism, we will come to a very realistic, down-to-earth attitude, saying that yes, psychedelics have a potential in cure and treatment and also for human development, but it is a very limited potential still. So it is a potential, yes. Or maybe limited is the wrong word, but it is a potential that is not to be overestimated, right? So it is a potential that's
not inherently, but in the right circumstances with the right,
Exactly, and that's a good point actually. One aspect of this more down-to-earth realistic approach would be that it's not so much about the substance itself, but about the context and the integration. And maybe this is true for other substances as well. If the context is really the more valuable and more important factor, maybe then there can be context for, as you said, Lucas, heroin or crack as well. I mean, it's a very, very funny thing to think about right now, but who knows, right?
I mean, people have used hammers to build houses, but people have used hammers to kill people. Like it's a tool.
Yeah.
It depends on how someone wields it.
Yeah, I mean,
of course, you can make the claim.
I definitely see your point. I still have some difficulties there with the kind of the similar line you both use, would just be explore the potential and then we see what they can do, what they can't do. I actually think we shouldn't even think negatively of a drug, even if it doesn't have any potential. Like if it's, I mean, we sell poison in stores, right? And it's perfectly legal and okay. And you can have poison if you want to, right? Rat poison or whatever. And you can have very bad substances that might, like a potential substance that basically just is not fun, it's just horrible, and it will kill you very easily, right? And we can say it's not an inherently bad thing for the substance to exist and for people to use it. It's very dangerous. I think that's definitely things we can say, right? There's no, I don't think of a danger egalitarian, right? There's definitely different levels of dangers. Also, as you said, right, substance abuse disorders are very different for different substances. So it's definitely different dangers. But dangerous is not bad.
Exactly. That's a naturalistic fallacy, right? Maybe it's all about this fallacy, actually. To have this empirical findings on the one hand side, the descriptive science and also the harm, which is descriptive phenomena, and then the ethical value judgment on the other side, which is of course a fallacy to be made.
Yeah, and then the big question is like, how would we want to deal with that as a society? So how do you work, or like what do you do with very dangerous substances? Because there are dangerous substances, and we know illegalizing it doesn't stop people using it. Right, it might make them more dangerous, as you see in the USA with the opioid epidemic and fentanyl and all these substances like not having clean drugs and all that stuff. So I think that's a way that's making it actually more dangerous. And what we want for substance to be as little dangerous as possible, right? I think a way to do that might be legalization.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the Netherlands, we have quite a low percentage of people that are dependent upon cannabis, and you can buy it anywhere from 18. I think not even everybody, not even half of the people try it. And often people try it and they're like, it's not for me. And I think this is a much more healthy relationship than the very paternal way of approaching these things. It just incites people to be curious. We all know we're humans. You tell us don't do that, and you ask
Sensation
why.
seeking.
Yeah, exactly. And you say, if somebody asks why, and somebody says just don't, that's interesting. You're like, wow, is there something you're not telling me? There must be something about it that you don't want me to know. You know, it drives the whole the whole problem further.
I mean, I always think about it if crack cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine would be legally available, let's say, as a prescription, I mean, how many people would actually really go there? Well, finally, I can do it. That was the only thing stopping me. I didn't want to do an illegal drug, but now I finally can go and smoke crack. That's what I really want to do. And that was the only thing stopping you. I don't believe, I mean, there might be people. It's definitely, I mean, I do think it might just increase a bit in terms of use, right? Just because some people might want to use it and just don't know where to get it. But then well, it's in the pharmacy down the road. It might be possible. I still think it's about the dangers and making a moral judgment on a substance itself, which, I mean.
But that is a very, this discussion can lead to a very broader topic, because of course, if you say, we don't need laws to legalize certain things, because if we haven't had these laws, still people would judge for themselves and have like this conscience, right? And say, for example, it is illegal to murder someone, obviously, but still people are murdering, and who really is not murdering because it's illegal, right? So probably, well, of course, this is another discussion, but
that's the difference. Yeah, that's true.
It's interesting. Maybe we can ask Portugal to run another decriminalization experiment.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was so curious about having this anarchy discussion. Yeah, because this is actually one of the main arguments for it, that laws are not really necessary to hold people back from immoral behavior.
Yeah, actually, really interesting point. I just read recently. I mean, it might be a bit off topic for anybody listening, but I think it might have some kind of point. Was getting into the prison abolitionist movement. Basically, people saying there shouldn't be any prisons at all. Like, are just unnecessary. Well, they're not unnecessary now, but we should, in an ideal society, we would eliminate the things that lead to the harmful behavior of people, right? I mean, depending on the country, obviously prisons are horrible, right? The USA with their privatized prison system and so forth, but even very modern and rehabilitation-focused prisons like in Norway, Anders Breivik lives in basically a single apartment, and they have walks every day. And they're even saying we should aim for these to be eliminated, because if we don't need prisons, I mean, we have a very good society, right? I thought that was a very, very interesting point. And goes kind of in the same direction, right? We should aim for a society where we don't need the law to tell someone to, well, not do that, and don't have the laws, apparently. That might be an interesting point. But I'm still not entirely convinced, to be honest. But please, gave me something to think about.
Well, it's about the process, right? If you look at the representation of mental health issues in the prison system, I don't know the number, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 80%, or like, I'm just saying a random number, so don't get me down on it, but I know it's very, 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 very highly represented. Basically, we try to heal the people with mental issues, but if they do something bad before we get to the point where their community realizes, oh wait, there's something wrong with you, or you need help, and they inadvertently hurt somebody else, it's like, okay, bye.
Actually ties in really what we're talking about substance use, because if you're criminalized for substance use disorder and you go to prison, then you don't have an opportunity to get treatment, right? Because as we say, addictions and substance use disorders are a very real thing. For most people, they're very harmful and they have negative consequences, and people don't want to have that most of the time. So you should have the ability to get medical treatment without fearing the police, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, I mean, the reality of everyone who has a substance use problem, except for alcohol and tobacco, is that they have to deal with the law the whole time, right? It's always something they have in their minds.
That's true. Yeah. So people are coming back.
Right.
Perfect. Welcome back, everyone, or almost everyone, since the rest is still coming.
Would you also want to share our process later on, Andy, if they are sharing their process, what we kind of talked about? I think there could be an addition if we have some space for that.
Sure.
Of what we might do.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. I think now everyone is back, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can I get a feel for the general vibe? How was the discussion for everyone? Can I see happy faces or very angry faces? Nice. That's good to see. Yeah, so judging from that, is there anyone who, because I don't know exactly what the constellation of the groups was, is there anyone that would like to share their process and viewpoint that you culminated upon first?
I'll take a stab at it.
Please do.
I just wanted to say that I would advocate the exceptionalism. I think that psychedelics are unique. It's a unique class. It's a unique category. Particularly the research I'm doing is in the aryl cyclohexylamines, which is the ketamine family, and PCP. And it's such a young category that even the mechanism of action is barely understood, and the glutamate mechanism is different from serotonin. So there's so much we don't know, and I think there's so much potential. But I would compare it to a person where it's all nice that we all want to be equal, and maybe we are, but we're not all the same competencies. So kind of in this, or if you want to use an automobile, a Porsche is not a Dacia. So, they're both cars, but just not the same car.
Thank you. That's a good analogy. Was that the general vibe in your group as well? Were you quite agreeing with each other? Or was there? It
was pretty agreeable. Yeah, there was 4 people. One person was silent, I'm sorry, the Danish names fuck me up. So Johannes and I can't think of. I'm sorry if I'm fucking up her name, but it was a good conversation.
Elena.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to share from another group?
Yeah, maybe I can share our conversation, which was quite interesting. So maybe just I can start off the metaphor with the cars, because we sort of had the impression that just because not every car is a Porsche, we don't want to force everyone riding a Porsche. So we all agreed that they are exceptionally interesting, the psychedelics, but we don't want to say that just because we can objectively say probably that they are safer, and the other drugs, for instance, like heroin, can more likely cause any harm. But if we, in the first line of reasonings, stigmatize other drugs because of that, then we ran into our own authoritative thinking line of reasoning, which says that people cannot see something of other, just psychoactive or psychostimulant substances. So maybe under perfect conditions, even the heroin experience can be, let's say, beneficial. Of course, on an objective level, they cause much more likely harm. But this doesn't, again, imply that we have to make people not be open or not try to find the reasons for that. It can be also system thinking, which helps in that, because it is probably there's the opportunity that other people who feel affiliated to other drugs find their meaning in those experiences. And if we think of something exceptional in the psychedelic experience, then again, this ran into some sort of not liberal thinking, or I don't know. So we all agreed that they are like objectively more safe than other drugs, and they are that they are like exceptionally interesting, for instance, but like the whole exceptionally stance is kind of difficult for us in the end. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, like moving forward with the analogy of the car, even a Porsche, like a Dacia, which may be nice in the city, but a Porsche, you have to be careful with the gas on the pedal because you might easily get out of the curve, and it might use a lot more fuel. So
700 horses isn't for everybody.
exactly. No, very, very literally. So I'm wondering, does anyone feel enticed to? Does anyone feel they have an opinion oppositional of what was just expressed, or you just want to add something?
With our group, we agreed that Carla would present, and then I would add some things because we had kind of opposite opinion. So Carla, do you wanna say something first, or do you want me to say something first?
I can say first. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have an opinion against the psychedelic exceptionalism, and my first argument is that, in my opinion, there is no good and bad drugs, because all drug uses depend on three interrelated factors, not just the substance, but also the person and the context. And by the person, I mean their personality, their life history, their psychological functioning. And by the context, I mean the social and the cultural background in which the person used that drug. So when we think about drug use, regardless of what type of drug is, there is an interaction between these three factors. Neither is more important than the other, and we can't dissociate them. And I think psychedelic exceptionalism is just considered one of these factors in this interrelation. So I say that, in my opinion, the same way a person can use psychedelics in a healthier way than heroin, in the same way a person can use heroin in a much healthier way than psychedelics, because it's not the substance, it's the way people use it. And psychedelics, like all types of drugs, has risks if not used correctly. Maybe they don't become addictive, but they can cause serious and long-term trauma. And I think we are living a great moment in terms of opportunity to reform drug policies. So I think we must be very careful with the message that we are sending to the society, because holding this view that psychedelics are better than other drugs will perpetuate negative social representations about other substances, and it will have consequences in the people who use that drugs. And lastly, if we think about drug criminalization historically, we can see that groups with more power pursued substances consumed by minorities, such as the opium consumed by Chinese immigrants in the US during the Industrial Revolution, which allowed the dominant groups have more power over minorities, controlling the substances they use. So it was not about pharmacological criterions, it was about social control of minorities and about power relations. So thinking about current times and in this issue of psychedelic exceptionalism, triggered me this question: are psychedelics mostly used by a specific group of people? For example, perhaps people with higher levels of education or with more resources? And accepting this psychedelic exceptionalism could perpetuate power relations between groups of people that use different drugs? Yeah. This is.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very interesting point you make. And Bas, I think you wanted to add?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree that psychedelics are not better to take for everyone in every situation. But I think there are some, and it's also, I'm also against judging people for the drugs they use. But I think if you make a comparison with an analogy with food, like if you wouldn't, in this line of reasoning, you wouldn't be allowed to say that some foods are better than than others, because it would stigmatize people with obesity or whatever. But you wanna teach children that they should eat healthy. And I think psychedelics, because they're not addictive and people use them less, that's already a bonus, because with many substances they are addictive, they cause dependence, and they feel good in the short term, but not necessarily in the long term. And I think if they are used responsibly, of course that's people's own choice, but I think you can make some kind of judgment to say like this, like psychedelics have just in general more benefit for people than a lot of other drugs. So I think you can't say that everything is equal. So yeah, that was my point.
Thank you for that addition as well, Bas. Did every group now share their process, or are we missing one?
We are missing one, and I could just proceed.
Please.
Okay, so we had a very nice discussion, but we were all pretty undecided actually. We all agreed on that there is no objective moral good or bad in drugs. They are just biological compounds and they tend to do something in the human body. But we kind of got to a conclusion which we called the agnostic approach somehow, because we feel like psychedelic exceptionalism could be good for now, but in the long run we have to keep in mind that there is more to the story. So we have established the metaphor of the cars and the Porsche and the Dacia and whatever, and in my opinion, even though there are different cars, we tend to live in a society, speaking with this metaphor, where most people say, oh, cars suck, every car suck, I don't care if it's a Porsche or Dacia, they are dirty, they're old-fashioned. So people in general dislike drugs, and there is a general stigma about drugs as a whole. So we, in our small, funny psychedelic mind foundation and followers bubble, know that psychedelics have their benefits or can have, but the general vast majority in the societies of this world doesn't. So I guess it's kind of sensible for now to have the psychedelic exceptionalism to kind of hook people and show them that there is more to this whole subject of drugs than just drugs equal evil, which is the basic assumption which most people do. And I think psychedelics all brought us here, and we were brought here more or less because we heard that they have beneficial sides and so on, and not because we thought about, well, is really every drug that evil? And yeah, so we feel or felt as a group that psychedelic exceptionalism can work as a stepping stone to get the interest of the people and to kind of shift around the stigma on all drugs. And if we kind of have established that people distinguish between several drugs, we should always say in the second step then, well, of course, psychedelics are no wonder medicine, and all studies have been done with this therapist and under controlled circumstances. And this is as important for psychedelics as it is for every other drug. All right, so far so good.
Thank you, thank you. It's interesting that actually in the meantime, while you were in breakout rooms, Lucas, Patrick, and I also had a nice conversation, and the point you just made very well supports that actually, where we came to part of the conclusion we came to was that the egalitarian view kind of assumes a knowledge and evidence-based perspective on the substances, that every individual has sort of a responsibility to educate themselves to be able to engage with psychoactive substances in a way that is responsible, taking harm reduction practices into account, and yeah, being aware of the possible outcomes, of the risks, and of the perhaps the possible benefits, depending on which kind of individual they are. And I very like that you say that we might need this now, because that's something we also thought of, that you might need this exceptionalism to create a social impetus to do research, to gain this knowledge needed for this egalitarian view to come into existence. Because if we have knowledge about all these different psychoactive substances, about their benefits, about the risks, then we might actually be able to reach a point where we can get rid of all the exceptionalism, and get rid of the, bless you, get rid of the stigmatization of people choosing whichever, and be aware of the benefits. Sorry. Yeah, so that's actually the perfect setup for that. So thank you for that.
Maybe adding to this, Andy, because of course we talked about this, and I also have something in favor of this argument, that we kind of need this exceptionalism in the short term, but then in the long term, whoever that is, will then say, you know, it's actually it's more realistic, and all drugs have positive sides and also downsides. But I'm not so sure actually. Maybe it isn't. It can also cause some harm to have this exceptionalism in place, and then many people believe in it and overestimating the potential, which can of course also lead then to harm. So why not in the first place just be honest and say, you know, there's potential, but there's also harm. And yeah, do we really need this exceptionalism now? I'm not so sure. What are your opinions about this?
I might just actually hop in onto that, because I think you're making actually a very good point. That I get the idea that we do it step by step, right? We started with cannabis, and we kind of got it legal some places, and now it's psychedelics, and then step by step we can, or whoever can show people, well, other substances are also okay. But I think the problem I see with that is that during the time, all the time we don't change the situation for other substances, people get harmed by the still existing stigma, right? So we see that for psychedelics, like Patrick mentioned at the beginning, the legal-illegal division that we have. So if you do it step by step, right, it's going to take 5 years to legalize psychedelics, 50 more to go to cocaine, and then another 100 for methamphetamine. That means 100 years of stigmatization for crystal meth users, which means 100 years of not having safe access and clean substances and clean syringes and whatever. So I think that might be difficult, but actually, even though I very much sympathize with the step-by-step approach, because that's actually an approach we take with psychedelics right now, right, through medicalization and then maybe enculturation.
I think Camille, you also wanted to add on this?
Yeah, maybe. I think that, as Oscar, that was in the same group as me, said, we can assume that psychedelics are exceptionally interesting because of when you look at the benefit-risk balance of psychedelics, you can notice that there is very low risk in terms of addictive properties, in terms of lethal dose, in terms of the safety that was observed in the studies. And in the other side, he received the grant of breakthrough therapy by the FDA. He has very much a lot of potential in mental health research, and this way we can put an exceptional status on anything, because as it was said previously, the recreational usage and what you do about with the drugs is really important in the aspect of if it will end being good or bad. And I think when someone was saying that, yeah, we're in a society that thinks that every drug is bad and things, yeah, in one sense, recreational usage of any drug, abuse and something is bad. But some substances have some interests that could be used for medicine or society. And then when you look at a objective benefits risk balance with, as the pharmaceutical industry does for developing and putting on the drugs on the market, then you can see that psychedelics are indeed interesting. And when substances like that, like ketamine, receive an approval on the market, then they are not anymore considered as drugs, recreational drugs, but their potential, the benefits are recognized in the medical field and can be used in an objective and beneficial way for patients who could need it, or for person who can benefit from these therapies. So I think that is the approach we should put with every substance. No exceptionalism per se, but an objective and rational view on the benefit-risk balance, the use of some K mechanism or that could be effective for people and for specific disease, and always do safe reduction practice for every recreational use, because we can't, whatever the drug it is, we can't segregate people for using each drugs. We can say it's less safe for you to use this drug, but the way we regard these people using different drugs should be the same, and everyone should receive the necessary aid for quitting and drugs and surviving in this society. That's it.
Are there any other people maybe want to answer to this? I think, Andy, you just lost your connection, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
I think the main what makes psychedelics unique is it's a kind of in the name, like it's from the words for mind and manifesting. I think it shows you what is inside, and I think with most other drugs they tend to more make you hide from the things that are there, more push things away. So I think in that sense psychedelics are better for society, because things I think it's better for health, but yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, better for health and better for personal development as well.
Yeah, if
we
we consider that objectively it can benefit to personal development, then it should be used for this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, Lucas, your point was that, of course, we didn't have much research done on, for example, the potential beneficial effects on personal development that other substances have, right?
Yeah.
So we now know that psychedelics have it, but we cannot assume that no other drugs also have this potential beneficial effects, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a big part that we, because of the stigma we already have, we attribute certain effects to certain substances, and that's also increases like the possibility of experiencing these effects, right? That we see that with psychedelics, we always talk about setting with psychedelics, and you get what you put in, but it's true for all drugs. If you don't think any substance can help you, it probably won't. In the article, actually, Carl Hart makes a very nice example. He talks about alcohol is very accepted as a social lubricant, right? It helps you to talk to other people at the party. While amphetamines also a very good social lubricant. Heroin might be amazing lubricant, or benzodiazepines, you could take away your anxiety, right? All these different kinds of drugs, but the way people talk about it very much determines what we do with them and what effects we want to have or what we want to see.
But this effect is on the short term, and in the long term, it's actually, there are indications that the opposite is true. If you use benzodiazepines for anxiety, then if you stop it, it's going to come back harder. So, but it can, like for example, panic disorder. It's like when anxiety just needs to be subdued for a while, because otherwise it's gonna escalate. So in some cases it can be better. So I like the analogy with like the different types of cars and terrain or whatever. Like for maybe for many substances we just haven't found the right niche yet. So because they might be beneficial in, like, maybe heroin. Yeah, I mean, heroin is of course great for opiates are great for anesthesia, pain reduction for surgery and that kind of thing. But I think I would still say that in general psychedelics are better, like for most people. But that's more or less an intuitive judgment. It's not really objective.
So maybe then, as maybe the last question, or one of the last questions for today, was also raised with the live stream. One person asked, maybe if we are speaking about decriminalization and also destigmatization, isn't it then useful to also illegalize, not illegalize, but legalize all the psychoactive substances that are now illegal, because they will also lead to stigmatizations? What are your thoughts on this? Is legalization of the psychoactive substances helpful in this context?
Yeah, there seems to be a really big schism, what I call the psychedelic schism, between your decriminalization nature camp and then the other camp, which is medicalization. But I feel like both sides, it almost seems like everybody's vying for ownership of the experience, and everybody wants to determine how it's going to be. And I don't think it's a binary play. I don't think it's right, wrong, black, white. I think it's both. I think decriminalize it so somebody doesn't get scared getting pulled over with a bag of mushrooms, and then also work on medicalization so you have a safe place to go and do it. But if you're so inclined to do it at your house, you know, you don't need the DEA kicking in your door. So I think these two things, I call it the schism, just like the religious thing, because people get so hostile. Everybody wants to control how this is going to be over the next 5-10 years. And it's so petty to me. It's silly. Nobody's right. It's bigger than right or wrong. But it's interesting to watch this get played out. I'm happy that I'm alive during this time, because it's a very interesting time to be alive. But I do see a lot of that going on. And when you were talking earlier, Bas, one thing that came to my mind was this concept of you have a sovereign right to your own consciousness. So with a lot of the other drugs, I don't know that they make you any better. They just turn you into an addict. And you know, the addiction part is interesting. So that kind of came to my mind when you were talking. But overall, I think that's how this gets played out. You have decriminalization, and then you also have medicalization. But behind both of these, ultimately, I would like to see it all get legalized. And, you know, maybe society would look more like a Brave New World than a dystopian Brave New World than whatever we've been living in.
Yeah, we do not know yet, right? Are there any other thoughts on this?
I can comment. As someone who was definitely had all drugs in one category as being bad. And there was no question in my mind that I was definitely like an anti-drug crusader in a sense. I mean, I was, you know, my son had been to 3 rehabs for heroin addiction, and I just would never have tried anything like that. However, because we do have medical marijuana in Florida, and love can have a pretty powerful effect. I was in a relationship with someone who was using marijuana and said that he wasn't using it anymore. And anyway, long story short, it opened my eyes to something I never would have experienced. And I found that it works for me. Like I shared in my group around meditation. I have a friend who's in recovery for 20 plus years that cannot unlock some of his traumas, and he's going for, we have a psychedelic, the psilocybin, the mushroom treatment. So I'm kind of on a whole new journey myself with seeing how someone had shared about how it's an invitation into your own mind, that it's the one aspect of my mind that I've never evolved or opened. I just lived in the conscious mind. I didn't ever go into my unconscious. Has actually helped me see where my healing needed to really be, more than any therapist did. So I'm definitely, I mean, I can't, right now for me, this, if I were given that question again, are you in favor of the exceptionalism or not? Because of where I come from in a society that is anti-drug and has pushed that, my whole educational system and my whole society, I would say I am for, as our group leader had said, the exceptionalism at this point. Like it's a path in, like it's a path in. So, and there's treatment manuals now. I was just researching here about PTSD and MDMA assisted psychotherapy in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. So when it comes from a medical and a research empirical study perspective, it begins to take on a different, it opens my mind, and it's opening I had a call from a woman in London that said, you know, where do you get this MDMA treatment? So it's opening me to a whole new world. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. That's I think, unless somebody has a very, very pressing point, I think that's a beautiful point to close off with. And yeah, with that, I know Lucas and Patrick also want to thank you all very, very, very much for participating today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks to you everyone for tuning in and participating. We didn't know if everybody would be willing to share, so thank you guys for making this fun.
Yeah, totally. I'd like to just say that we are, this is the second time we've done it. We're developing this platform. This is the first time we've done it in this way. And well, personally, I really liked it. The engagement with everybody is something that I'm really enjoying. So yeah, please keep an eye out for the next online discussion. I'm sure you will find, or we'll try to find another interesting topic. And for those of you that didn't know the Mind Foundation yet, we are a non-profit organization that tries to bring a scientific and evidence-based approach to the potential of the psychedelic experience, which is more than just taking psychedelics, but also going into deep meditation, breath work. These can all manifest a psychedelic experience in a person, and in the right context with a proper guide has already demonstrably shown that it can have healing properties. And I think that's the whole point why we're all interested in why we're speaking about this here, to bring that to a bigger audience and to create this destigmatization of these substances. So please, if you feel like supporting that, take a look. Maybe you can have a look at a membership for the Mind Foundation, because it's an exciting time. But still, it's not one yet. There's many pitfalls, and we need to fight to get this. Well, I don't like to use the word fight, but to educate people. Yeah. So thank you.
Next to others with more online discussions together with you. Yeah.
Very much. The link is in the chat if you would like to take a look. And again, yeah, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. Even though I had a blue screen after one session, I'm happy I still got everything.
Yeah, I think it was awesome. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time, and have a wonderful evening.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Yeah.
You too.
Or morning, depends on where you are.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Should we just stay in the room for our after discussion? Or should we stop for the streaming to stop?
Yeah, I guess we